Good day. Today is July 9th, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline, this special Stampede edition. I'm joined by my usual cowboys, Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
You
And tip of the hat to Cory Morgan, Western Standard senior Alberta columnist.
Yeah.
All right, now we got that out of the way. We got a lot for today's show. Everyone is lying about Epstein. It's not normally a pipeline kind of topic. It's U.S., but I think it's global in its implications. What the lying cover-up of the Epstein client list, I think, is going to do to trust in our institutions and trust that we can actually ever change things by electing someone new. We're going to chat about that. The RCMP say that if someone you know used to support gender identity rights, but now supports traditional values, they might be a red flag for terrorism. We're going to chat about that. CBC host rage quits. Oh, we love our CBC stories, and we just love it when people rage. When people quit the CBC, they quit the CBC. So we're going to chat about his rage quitting here. But we're going to kick off with constitutional amendments that Alberta wants made to reform Canada, but will never happen. So we'll start with you, Cory. The Alberta government's Alberta Next panel, chaired by Premier Danielle Smith. We found out, they just put out a video here with their proposals. They want some constitutional amendments.
Yes, she's got. I think part of it maybe is distinguishing from Jason Kenney's Fair Deal panel. This is a little different. She's proposing constitutional change, and maybe we'll show a video clip just to see where they're going with this before we talk about it.
Examples of proposed constitutional reforms include the following. 1. Amending the division of powers to indicate that core areas of provincial jurisdiction, including over natural resources and health, are immune from federal legislation. 2. Imposing constitutional limits on the federal spending power in areas of provincial jurisdiction. 3. Adhering strictly to representation by population in the House of Commons. Right now, those living in smaller provinces are greatly overrepresented when compared to those living in larger ones.
All right, so yeah, two of us in this room are old enough to remember what it was like going through Meech Lake and Charlottetown Accords, which led nowhere. And this is proposing things that are even bigger than that. I mean, I don't like putting out futility in policy ideas. I mean, they all sound really nice. But that third one really, right off the bat, is a complete deal breaker because the underpopulated provinces are never going to vote to reduce their power in the House of Commons. It's not going to happen. And our constitutional formula requires that we get, 7 out of 10 provinces to support it.
Representing 50% of the population.
But I like where she's going with it because I think what Premier Smith is doing is demonstrating the futility of trying to change Canada's system, and we're going to see where it goes.
So one of the ones, there's a number of potential constitutional amendments in the presentation there. One of the ones was not on that video, though, was a Triple E Senate, where all provinces have an equal number of senators regardless of population. Theoretically, that should make the smaller provinces that would lose members of parliament that they don't deserve by population should make them happy. The problem is that in Canada, those provinces are also overrepresented in the current Senate. Alberta, with twice the population of all 4 Atlantic provinces combined, has pretty much half the senators as just Nova Scotia, just New Brunswick. Those guys are never going to vote to give up this sweetheart deal.
Yeah. In their list, though, they do have actually either abolish the Senate entirely or have it represent provincial interests as originally intended. So I imagine if they expanded, what she means by that, it probably means Triple E. But again, as you said, it's just not going to happen.
No. So what's the point of this? I mean, if I thought there was any chance whatsoever Canada could be reformed constitutionally, I wouldn't be an Alberta nationalist. But I think there's a 0% chance. It's just not happening.
Certainly under the existing formula, it seems so highly unlikely that you might as well call it 0 chance. However, what it does do is that it presents the Alberta argument to the national stage, to the national conversation, shall we say, in a way that is acceptable and can be engaged on by the folks back east who find Alberta just generally offensive in principle, and our own particular brand of Canadianism to be just something we don't want to be associated with. Pickup trucks and hard hats and cowboy hats, and so So when you render it in terms of constitutional amendments, well, that's something they can engage on. So between that and the fact that the very fact that it's out there as a serious proposition, which needs to be talked about before it's dismissed, it gives the Premier quite a bit of time, actually, to fend off some of the voices of independents within our own party are a bit awkward for her to handle at the moment. So I think it's a stalling tactic. I agree with you; it's never going to happen, but it's a good way to articulate what we don't like about the rest of Canada.
So, Cory, it would depend on the timing of a lot of this, but we're headed towards an eventual independence referendum here in Alberta. I can see where if this was done beforehand and a deadline is issued for the other provinces and the feds to ratify, because also Ottawa itself has to ratify. If all the provinces ratified, Ottawa would just do it. But if Alberta votes for this and it goes to the other provinces and they reject it, and this is all, then we go to an independence referendum. I think that would very much strengthen the hand of the independence cause, because then it said, here are these very reasonable, good faith amendments we have made to fix Canada, and the rest of the country has told us to pound sand. Do you think that's... I think depending on how the timing around this is scheduled, if it's done at the same time as an independence referendum, I think it actually probably hurts. But if it's done in advance, do you see it as helping?
In the long game, yes, absolutely. I've been a dedicated, Alberta nationalist for a long time already. In speaking in areas and talking to people, though, a lot of what people keep saying is, well, we need to try everything first. Well, this is everything. Here it is. We're going to try again, and we're going to fail. And once that failure is there, people won't have that case to make in fighting this any longer. For the shorter term, though, if we're looking at an independence referendum, that'll probably be coupled with a lot of these questions. It'll probably hurt people who want to go, hurt the cause for people who want to go the full option of independence now, which is, I'm one of them. But I also understand that, and I know some people get upset with me, but I don't think we're even close to a 50% vote on that yet. There's just too many people who still want to try every possible means of change. So this will help in the long run. In the short term, though, it's going to be a little tougher on the referendum.
It's like going for counseling before the divorce.
Yeah, basically. You already know you're going out, but okay, let's just go through the motions and,
Actually, that's maybe not a bad way to put it here. Because, I know we're not at a majority support yet for independence. We're at a very large minority, and might be at a high
end. Not insignificant.
It's big enough it can't be ignored anymore. It's not big enough to win. I've said this for a long time. The policy needs to be equality or independence. Equality is never going to happen. The East is never, ever going to accept a constitutional rearrangement where we're on an equal constitutional basis with them. They're not going to accept it. But I don't think Albertans are going to be willing to accept going the whole hog of independence unless they believe we have tried everything. We've already tried this stuff before, and it's always failed. But I was like 5 or 6 years old when Charlottetown happened, and Charlottetown was an attempt to change things, and it was still a bad one that should have been rejected. It was rightfully rejected by the West. But I think there's a new generation that needs to see us go through the motions again and do it genuinely and in good faith. And after it's rejected, maybe then.
And it does make it easier if the rest of the country is forced to look at this and say, well, actually, that's a reasonable case to make. They're not just nuts out there.
Well, I guess then there's a question of, well, will they formally reject it? Because we had a referendum on a constitutional question, equalization, and it was roundly ignored by the rest of the country. Now, some of that took place at a moment where then Premier Jason Kenney his political capital had sunk to zero. COVID had completely sunk his premiership. He really wasn't in a position to go march to Ottawa and kick down the door at the PMO and demand a response. There was just no response from Ottawa or any other province. What's the likeliness, though, that other provinces formally respond by actually voting for or against the constitutional amendment, or that they just ignore it as they did with the Kenny equalization referendum?
Well, I don't think it's even going to go to a national referendum. I don't think the provinces will accept what's being asked here to go even that far with it. They're just going to ignore it and tell us to roll it up and shove it somewhere else, and that's fine.
You don't think you might get a little sympathy from Saskatchewan at least?
Well, sure. And we're speaking of the provinces that were holding the power right now, though, and it's not Saskatchewan. So, I mean, Scott Moe is supportive, but there's no way the Maritime provinces, and absolutely no way Quebec is going to be even considering these for a moment. So it's going to be in the Alberta discussion solidly because of this for months and months. And it's going to be completely ignored by the ones with the authority to change anything. So I'm looking forward to the rejection.
The question mark one is Doug Ford. I don't think he'd be very happy with these, but he is... he wants to be prime minister one day. And if he wants to be prime minister of a conservative government in Canada, you're going to need Alberta in it. Otherwise, Conservatives are never winning in Canada again. He has how he governs Ontario aside, which is a big deal, he does at least try to sound friendly and sympathetic to Alberta concerns. If you want to keep Alberta in Canada, you're going to have to respond reasonably to this. I could see Doug Ford maybe not endorsing the changes, right, but being willing to put it to a referendum.
You pay lip service to it, but even
I could see Ontario referendum on this. And if so, that kind of makes it a national thing at that point.
If Ontario does, I can't see it. I don't see him putting it to the Ontario voters. I can see him talking a good game, but he doesn't want that discussion among Ontario voters because he's going to have to take a solid side. And Doug Ford is mushy. He's going to do whatever he thinks is going to get him to the top. And yes, Alberta is requisite, but so is Ontario. And bringing this sort of referendum to the Ontario voters, then he's going to have to take a side on that thing. And he's not going to win either side he takes as a conservative. So I just don't see it.
And there was, of course, Mr. Ford, who was ready to sacrifice Alberta's interests a few months ago over tariffs in order to keep Ontario's intact. So I don't think you should assume that Doug Ford's going to be on side with this. I don't know. Like Lord Cory says, he changes when he needs to.
All right. Well, we'll switch it up here. A CBC host, Travis Donraj, I'm sure I pronounced that correctly. He accused the the CBC of, quote, performative diversity, tokenism, a system designed to elevate certain voices and diminish others. His lawyer, Catherine Marshall, we've had her on programs before. She says that he was told not to book people of a conservative persuasion. I know I certainly have been invited to the show. Nigel, why don't you elaborate a bit more on the latest big rage quit at the CBC?
So there's actually two levels to take this. One is just exactly as Derek has explained there, that there is a professional disagreement between the employer and the employee, and as is usually the case, the employee loses. The other is to say, all right, let's sort of say it out loud. He is a person. Travis Donraj is a person of color. And, in one sense, he ticks boxes for the CBC because, you push all the old white guys out, and now you bring in the women and you bring in the people of color, and you look very modern and multicultural and inclusive and diverse and all the other things. But he did not fit the exact mold, because what they want is diversity of appearance. They do not want diversity of opinion. And that leads to the second level at which you can look at his, and that is in concert with Jamil Javani, presently a Conservative member of Parliament, but a few years ago, 5 years ago, I think it was, fighting with his employer, Bell, because they had hired him for the same kind of reasons. I think, I can't say this out loud and definitively because the case, believe it or not, is not settled 5 years later. But
he says he was
hired as the black guy, all right? And therefore he was supposed to have black guy opinions, but he didn't. I mean, he's a Conservative member of Parliament. He certainly is not of the cut from central casting for a modern Canadian media company. So you have two examples where the media says, yeah, we want to make it look right. We want the branding of having people of color, women, sexual diversity, try and find a straight white guy on any of the on the CBC, and you've got to look down the channels quite a way. So when they get there, they find, and this is the testimony of Mr. Downraj, that isn't actually like that at all. That there is a power structure which controls his future, and it's not one that is that's nearly as diversity-minded or inclusive as they would like you to think. They just want the faces on the screen, but meanwhile, there are other people who are running it just like they always did. So, and that seems to be the experience of Giovanni. So there's a real rot in the media. And we knew this. We've said this many times. This is just the latest manifestation of it. So, I don't know, we'll wish him good luck. I noticed that you mentioned that he was represented by Catherine Marshall. It was Catherine Marshall who also represented Jamil Devani. And she has got kind of a history of looking after people who have strong opinions and don't necessarily conform. I wouldn't say she's an advocate for right-wing extremists, but she's not. And I wouldn't say that Travis Downraj was a right-wing extremist, because I think he probably is just a guy who genuinely wants to do journalism in an open...
He doesn't come across as even a conservative.
No,
he's just a guy doing his job.
But all of a sudden, he's understanding why conservatives are upset.
Yeah, I was going to go to the Jamil Giovanni comparison. I think that was CTV, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it was Bill Media.
Bill Media, yeah, it was radio. So, parent company. There's a lot of parallels there. He was also, he claims through his lawyer, Catherine Marshall, that he was punished, essentially, and demoted for saying that he had invited Catherine Tate, the president of the CBC, on to explain all these ridiculous...
This is Downraj you're talking about.
Yeah, Downraj. He was reprimanded, essentially, and punished in his career to try to have Catherine Tate on, and then he went... When she declined to do an interview about the ridiculous bonuses she's paying herself and other executives, he went and said she declined the interview. And they're like, you're taking our dirty laundry out. I mean, in a private company, you guys aren't allowed to say, this is a private company. No, there's confidentiality here. But, if you're the CBC, you're a government body. You have to be accountable, including to yourself, your own reporters. I mean, I was shocked when I saw, I remember that CBC story, that there was a CBC reporter willing to call out his own boss there. I was like, oh, brave. Turns out it was also not a good career move, as I figured at the time.
It works just fine for Jamil.
It did for him. He rage quit and parlayed it all the way to Parliament. But yeah, I don't know, Cory. This is not the first big rage quit from the CBC. There was Murray, others.
Yeah, Tara Henley. She came up and same sort of thing. And I believe, it doesn't mean that Tara Henley is a hardcore conservative or the other gentleman is. But if they came up as a idealistic journalism students, they wanted to be there. They wanted to cover both sides, and they get hit with that stark reality of, whoa, actually,
don't book any conservatives.
Yes, and it's the other aspect. They might be conservative a bit. There's the notion that progressives are terrified of, the reality that actually conservatives aren't all white straight men. So we see cases of tokenism, and I'm going to say the word out loud. That's what they've been doing. And,
that's what he called it himself. His own job was tokenism.
And they break from the mold. The other thing that terrifies progressives is somebody from the LGBTQ community and there's a lot, actually, and that's where they're really starting to come out as conservatives. It's ironic that they have, it's quite open that you can come out now as gay, which is great. But to come out as a gay conservative, that's and then there's a lot, because they're business owners, they're family people like anybody else, and they're saying we've had it with this stuff too. And the cracks showing in the mother corporate, I think, is beautiful, because the worst of the organizations as far as that goes.
What makes me mad about this, though, is that this mother corporation is the one that our new prime minister, in his throne speech, has just doubled the damn budget.
Oh yeah,
It went from like 1.5 billion bonus to, what is it, 2.6?
well, we're seeing exactly what he's rewarding
Yeah.
for is for suppressing the other party's views,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous. It's well, I mean, I think most of us here agree that we don't even really need a state broadcaster, but if indeed we must, that of all, as Derek was saying, is the one that should be trying its hardest to be balanced, because it's taking tax funding, and anybody who's watched CBC knows bloody well that they're terribly imbalanced. They always have been, but to have it this starkly exposed is an embarrassment for them, and I'm glad that this fella came out to rip into them.
Yeah, let's just call CBC what it is, a semi-official news agency.
Yeah.
Semi-official.
Well, CBC is not the only one who's concerned about having views not in line with official government, federal government policy. The RCMP now, too. So this week, there were, I think, 4 members of the Canadian Armed Forces arrested on terrorism-related charges. I mean, it's still, we don't know enough for me to say, but initially, some of this smells a little funny. They're saying we're stockpiling guns. I mean, well, that's not a crime. You're allowed to have as many guns as you like. For now, at least. You're allowed to have guns. They said they had plans to seize land. Seize land? That seems like an odd terrorism thing.
There were 4 of them.
4 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I normally associate terrorism with, you're going to get in a car and run over a crowd, or you're going to shoot up a bunch of people, or you're going to blow something up. I don't know what they were going to seize, what land they were going to seize, but they just said land. So it was like they're going to walk out to a field somewhere and say, this is ours. I don't know. Odd. But the whole thing has just struck me. I mean, there's been this big crackdown on people having non-social progressivist views in the Canadian Armed Forces. They give out tampons in the men's room on Canadian military bases now. That's a virtue signal if I've ever seen one. They've got DEI officers spread like Soviet commissars throughout the Canadian forces now. They've done everything they can to rip out the martial culture and spirit of our military and replace it as just essentially being another bureaucracy in uniform.
Bureaucrats at arms.
Bureaucrats at arms, yeah. Completely destroying the long, proud martial culture of the Canadian forces. And then just a few days before that, there was a story about there is a private Facebook chat group or something, a private group, and some of them are sharing some lewd things. There might be racist remarks in there or something, but it's a private group, and these guys are going to face potential discipline or even court-martial or something for having a private chat group. I grew up in military towns. I'm not a veteran. I grew up in military towns. I know military people. In private, they speak exactly like you would think. It's not pretty, but they're soldiers, especially among the enlisted men. So there's this weird thing going on, and then they announced these terrorism charges, and it just kind of sounds, I don't want to speak out of turn because we don't know enough yet, but we're getting this weird vibe that they were charged largely because maybe they held right-wing views and they were worried about it. That's the impression I got. And then kind of as if to confirm that inkling I'm getting, the RCMP officer here was on the CBC, and here's a portion of what she had to say.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. And if someone was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extreme.
All right. So, I was willing to indulge to a certain extent gender ideology just by being polite. But as things went absolutely nuts and off the rails, I've gotten less indulgent of people's delusions centered around mental illness. And, in some ways, I'm, a bit more supportive of some traditional values. It never occurred to me that I'd be a candidate for terrorism. That'd be a red flag. But, English is obviously her second language. But the way what I got from that gentleman was, if you've had a change in your views on some social issues and you think it might be a good idea to have a wife and a couple of kids, you might be under suspicion of terrorism by the feds.
You've been radicalized by the Western Standard.
If we're doing our job.
I guess so. Where does it stop? And I can see where it begins. It begins with a federal directive that we have to and start with these values of so-called values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then they talk themselves into a corner. And if you actually believe in what, never mind Christian civilization, all of civilization, for as far back as how many thousand years you want to take it, the nuclear family has always been mom, pa, and the kids. That's normal, and for that to suddenly be redefined as a red flag for terrorism doesn't show that there's something wrong with the people who believe that that's the model. It shows that there's something wrong with the perceptive abilities of the RCMP and the people who are instructing them. That's just crazy talk.
Cory, are you a red flag for terrorism?
I think I'm typically pretty harmless, but I'm quite socially liberal. I'm fine with trans folk. If you identify as such, I'll happily indulge. But eventually, as you said, the radicals have driven that so far over to the point where, yes, I'm not going to accept a person with testicles competing against women in sports. I'm sorry, you've gone well beyond reasonability. And to have, and let's talk about DEI. I think the RCMP member we heard from was a classic example of one, because she isn't bloody very bright. When you say something like that,
higher.
Yeah, she didn't get in there on her communication skills, that's for sure. Basically labeling, I think, what we're getting to a tipping point of most Canadians where they're not necessarily all talking about looking at a Norman Rockwell household, but they do realize that these activists have just gone well beyond the scope of reasonability. And now you are apparently a possible terrorist. It's just nuts. And it's not making enough news, I think, that we have somebody in that senior position. We've got concerns about extremists. We've got concerns about terrorists. Fine. But when you start talking about the red flags like that's talk about divisive and ridiculous.
Well, you know what will potentially radicalize people and get them to do something genuinely extreme? Shit like that. When you see a senior government official with police powers saying, if you used to believe in gender identity ideology, but now you think it might be a nice kid it might be a nice thing to have a traditional nuclear family, and that they're saying you're an enemy of the state. You're an enemy of official federal ideology. That could radicalize someone, because then they're going to say my way of life, my civilization, my family is at risk. It is targeted and considered undesirable by the federal government. And I can see someone taking that a bit far.
Well, Derek, it's coming at people from so many directions. There you have one particular example, but when the kids go to school, you don't know unless you really dig what they are being taught. You may recall that last week we were talking about the Premier's commission to remove sexually suggestive books from the school libraries. Why would you need to have the Premier getting involved in what should be a routine thing by the school librarian who says, well, jeepers, we're not going to have a comic book showing a couple of girls getting at it or boys gunning each other? That goes straight into the bin. Instead,
gunning each other. Quite the Stampede reference.
Can't believe you haven't heard that before, Derek. Or you.
I'm innocent.
Classic term.
You're the lewd and crude one.
Yeah, that's it. I guess today that's my role. Yes. But anyway,
on my turf.
what I'm trying to say to you here, amid the mocking, is that you have a couple of guys in the military who apparently say, things are going a little bit too far. What are we going to do about it, boys? Here, crack me another beer. And then you come back, and of course, there's trouble. And then you get back to the schools, and it's the same. Gosh, it was bad in Alberta. It's worse in Saskatchewan if you keep up with Chris Oldcorn's columns. And it's the same in every province. This influence, this attempt to redefine sexuality as something that isn't precise and can be anything. And are you sure you're a boy? Wouldn't you really rather be a girl? That is a threat that parents perceive, and they have now taken it to the provincial government. And bless their hearts, the Smith government has actually taken a look at it. I wish every province would do the same. So you get it there. You get it from the from private industry, where people are just pulled into human resources. Said, look, just so as you know, this is the company's stand on DEI. You've got to sign here that you agree with it. Well, I don't agree with it. Well, go and read it and then come back and sign it, because if you don't, it's not going to go that well for your advancement. It's everywhere.
And if you're looking again, we got some military members, it sounds like, went off the rails somehow, perhaps, or something went on. But the wokeism in the military and the stuff that's leaking out, again, we're talking about military, that people join that with an expectation or vision of something. And I just saw the other day a poster somebody put up from the Canadian military showing, watch out for sexual harassment. It could happen anywhere. And it shows a small blonde woman with a hand out and pushing a guy, and a Middle Eastern man, both in uniform, sitting back saying, please, hands off me.
I think they ripped that off of some German government propaganda posters showing like a blonde German woman sexually harassing a Middle Eastern man.
I mean, let's get realistic here. And I mean, they're getting exhausted with it. Sexual harassment exists. I imagine that there's some men who have been abusive towards women in the armed forces. Watch for those things. We got to get realistic about the demographic, gender-wise, and also culture-wise.
What is it you're trying to say, Cory? What is it you're trying to say?
What I'm trying to say is, if you want a high-risk area, get a straight Middle Eastern man, and it's going to be more likely, not all by any means, but if you want a trouble spot where there's going to be harassment of women, ask the Germans during New Year's Eve celebrations where it was coming from. It wasn't blonde women jumping on Middle Eastern men. It was Syrians groping women. But everything up is down, left is right. It's bizarre, it's backwards, and these military members are getting spoon-fed this crap, are getting overloaded, and that's these guys are creating the extremism and then pointing at traditional values as being the problem.
Yeah, there's not merely spoon-fed, but they're asked to agree.
Force-fed, actually, is a better way to put it. Yes, I mean, it's a feeding tube of woke garbage going into them, and they're overflowing from it.
So these 4 guys arrested, terrorism-related charges. As I've said, let me just cover my ass here. We don't really know what they're truly accused of doing. So I can't say if they're in the right or wrong. Totally unknown yet. But what I do know is the police statements around this, the government, the federal government statements around this, they're at least making it sound like they're dangerous because they hold maybe some traditional views. But also, guess who does martial culture, military culture, appeal to? Guys who like guns and shit,
or women of that inclination still of I want firearms and toughness and that sort of approach to things. I mean, this has been a divide and conquer thing going on for a while too. It's been interesting to watch them flip flop. Where recently I saw an article that basically said it's okay to embrace the Canadian flag again. But remember, for a while during the truckers' convoy, they were saying it's a sign of extremism if a person's waving a Canadian flag, and then suddenly, it became convenient for elbows up, and now it's okay to wear. It was never bad. I don't know anymore. Which symbols are you allowed this week and not? But you're going to be labeled an extremist if you're carrying the wrong one, according to the establishment.
Chaps, this is where the governments, and I mean all of them, are losing people. This is where distrust of authority comes from, is when authority tries to tell you that 2 and 2 does not equal 4, it equals 5. And this is a perfect example of the type that being a family person is somehow radical and could lead to terrorism. How are we supposed to trust a government that peddles that message through the RCMP at the military, which we trust to defend us?
Well, that's a hell of a segue to our last one. They're all lying about Epstein. I try to generally keep our pipeline topics focused on the West, if not the West, Canada, or Canada related to others. Epstein, well, it's an international thing. What's happening right now is within the purview of the American government, the DOJ, but it's got obvious international implications. We had princes getting caught up in this. The Epstein network was not limited to Manhattan, obviously, or an island. The Trump administration, you got Bondi, these guys saying, there is no list. There's nothing to release here. All that would be, if we released it, all we'd be showing you is kiddie porn. No, we don't want to see the kiddie porn. That should obviously never see the light of day in the public. That's just evidence, and it should stay under strict lock and key for all time. That's not what anyone's asking for. We want to know who were the clients. Did he keep a nice, neat alphabetized list? Probably not. But you must know who they are, because otherwise Ghislaine Maxwell is the first person in history charged for sex trafficking people to no one. You obviously know who the clients are. Who are they? Now, there's two real possibilities about why this is all of a sudden not being released. One is that Trump or major people in the Trump administration are on the list. I don't think that's particularly likely, because Trump himself was, until extremely recently, very gung-ho to release the list. So I think that's less likely as an explanation. Much more likely is that the intelligence blackmail operation that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were running succeeded. It has blackmail information on extremely powerful people, and those people have made clear that this guy is just not going to be releasing it. It'd be too damaging, probably to people in both parties. They've got the dirt on everyone, or enough people. And what this shows is, like, you can elect the most disruptive, anti-establishment, precedent-wrecking president ever. And at the end of the day, the powers that be are still truly in charge. And that, more than anything, mark this moment in our history of when we're going to have, this is another kind of Watergate level destroying in trust in our institutions, in our leadership, in democracy maybe itself, because I think it does show. Doesn't matter actually who you elect. The same people are in charge. And this is going to radicalize people.
Well, yes. I don't have a strong argument otherwise on that, and I'm not sure I particularly want one. It has the ring of truth to it. However, there is this one little corner there we need to look at, and that is, if you are so powerful that you can keep your name out of it, do you actually need to have blackmail files on however many people Epstein dealt with?
Well, that's one of the blackmail files. That's how you keep your name out of it.
Well,
if you expose me, I'm going to expose you. That's the way it works. That's how they kept this under wraps for so long.
If you're that powerful, do you need to do this? I guess. Maybe you're right. Maybe
well, that is the power.
Maybe that's where the power comes from.
The blackmail is the power. Like, Jeffrey Epstein doesn't appear to have had really a legitimate job in his life. He got paid hundreds of millions of dollars for some tax advice that turned out to not even be sound. It's clearly an extortion and blackmail ring,
or whatever the rest, the background or whatever on it. I mean, it's just something stinks to high heaven, and that's what a lot of Trump's own supporters now. And he must know he's gut punching his own base.
He has never been played double with his own supporters.
So much of this, and then just suddenly, you know what? Nothing to see here. Whoa, hang on a second. You've been talking about this for years, Mr. Trump. What's going on? It gets onto your desk, and then suddenly you flip out of it. And if that's going to, whether realistic or not, yeah, it's going to spawn theories. When there's a void, people fill the void. And often, sometimes it might be correctly or incorrectly, but the theories will become more crazy as you suppress what was in that thing.
Because we do know there is a cover-up.
There's something.
There is clearly a cover-up. You got to be an idiot to actually believe there was no cover-up here, that powerful people are not being protected. So, what people fill the void with, anybody's guess. And it's going to range from the plausible to the totally nutty. It's gonna get filled up.
And you can't counter it because they won't release the bloody information.
Because we know they're lying. We know they're lying.
Yeah, I mean, just on top of the very suspicious circumstances in which Epstein died, the memes and the whole rest, just with, was it suicide or not? I mean, the coincidence of the down cameras, the whole works of it and the timing. And now you've got this on top of it. You're just giving more fodder to the people who are inclined to take the
and you can tell Trump knows he's wrong. And I've never seen that before. I've seen him be wrong, but believe he is right. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it in his eyes until now, where he knows he's wrong. He's doing the wrong thing. You could see it in his eyes. You saw it when he was with Bondi the other day, and journalists asked, why this flip-flop on such an important issue that you've been on side on? What explains this? And your own people are angry. And he responded just by saying, why are you asking me about that? I mean, the economy's doing great. Why aren't you asking about the economy? And you could just see in his eyes, he knows he's on the wrong side of history here, but something is forcing his hand.
You need to replay that tape. You may have noticed that Bondi was just about to speak, and she had sort of had her mouth open, and he cut her off dead. It's like that. So I don't know what she was. Obviously, we don't know what she was going to say, but clearly he wanted to make sure that he messaged this the way he wanted.
And you see it in her eyes too.
Yeah.
Said, the files on my desk were just, we're censoring out the names of victims and whatnot to protect privacy. It's going to be coming. And what list?
Yeah.
What file? It's gone. These guys are lying. We can see right through them. And the big question is why and who.
Amen.
I think this is going to be a big cultural moment right now that we're going to look back on, and whatever comes from it, that's going to point to right here.
It feeds every conspiracy theory that there is going.
Whatever your theory is, this will fill it.
Yeah.
There'll be 1,000 different theories that this all fits into, and it probably does actually correctly fit one. I just don't know which one.
Yeah, well, they're only going to get crazier, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up with our parting shots, Nigel.
Yes. So, look, you may have noticed, if you're a regular reader, that we have been featuring ads for a forthcoming conference. The Alberta Christian Municipal Rally happens this Saturday, July the 12th, down at Southside Victory Church. It's to, I'm quoting from their literature here, that let's pray for the next mayors, city councilors, and school board trustees. Hear how Christians running in your area, learn how you can support them. Let's look to the future of Alberta. And they have got, actually not just in Calgary, they're meeting in Westlock, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Edmonton, something Flats, Anger Flat, Alder Flats, Drayton Valley, Lloydminster, Edmonton, Ponoka, and Grand Prairie. It's a very worthwhile effort by Michael Clark. Michael Clark was one of the people who ran for the Liberal Party leadership. I think he was trying to make a point rather than actually very little job. He's not very little, but he's a good guy. We'll go and see them tonight. Go and see them Saturday night in Calgary. In any of those other cities, look at our ads and maybe just go and see what they have to say.
It sounds like they might have traditional values, and so everyone going is going to end up on the RCMP's terror list.
True, could be.
Well,
red flags.
Yep. I guess I'm speaking to the one in Calgary, so there you go.
You've already been on the list for a long time. You're not a new addition. You've got your own agent.
You bet.
Okay, Cory.
Well, Mark Miller, alumni of Trudeau's wedding party and former cabinet minister. He was the immigration minister for a couple of years. Just seeing him out on X tweeting about immigration caps are contributing to lower asking rents in Canada. This came from the Housing and Mortgage Corporation, but he was among the group that was calling all of us, again, racists, intolerant, everything else, if we were daring to speak on slowing down the mass immigration that he was shepherding as immigration minister. And now that finally they're capping it a little bit, and lo and behold, the rents are going down as if supply and demand works. But again, back to that liberal flip-flop where they will just bald-faced, turn around and celebrate. Look at that. Look how good we are. We've reduced the immigration, and boy, it brought the rents down. Good work, you hypocritical chode. I've had it with these guys.
I think his views may have changed on some things, and now he has more traditional values.
Boy, that sounds like a traditional one.
I think the RCMP better look into him.
True enough.
All right. Business news. NVIDIA is the world's first $4 trillion company. I mean, you gotta just $4 trillion. I mean,
unimaginable.
That's a fake amount of money. That's not real.
That's country.
That's like a couple of years. Well, I guess it's only like 2 or 3 years of the U.S. federal deficit.
5 years ago, though, they didn't exist.
Yeah. Look.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's AI changing everything. I guess a side note, I guess Grok had some value changes as well in the last 24 hours. I thought AI singularity was going to come in the form of Skynet or the Matrix. I didn't think it'd just be a troll. But AI is so impossible to predict where it's going to go. Other than the end of the world, I think it inevitably does result in the destruction of humanity or enslavement by machines at some point. But what happens in the meantime to get there is impossible to predict. It's fun to watch and crazy every day. Okay, and just a programming note. Tomorrow, we've got our own little stampede party here for the Western Standard staff, where all the new folks are going to have to go through our hazing ritual and eat some prairie oysters. You can see a few of them behind. See the ginger right between Cory and Nigel here?
He's going to have a ball.
Yeah. And we got Leon. We got Tula. Oh, yeah. He's got a good one, Cory. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you got to stop freeloading. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content and be supporting the work that we're doing here. Thank you very much for joining us today. Yahoo.